Some mistakes don't feel like mistakes when they begin. They feel warm, safe, even hopeful. And that's exactly why you walk straight into them. That Sunday afternoon felt like any other quiet day in my life. I was standing in my kitchen holding a cup of tea I had already forgotten to drink. Retirement had made my days slow, predictable, sometimes a little lonely if I was honest with myself. That's when my phone rang. I glanced at the screen. I actually blinked for a second. Slipped out of my mouth before I even realized it. Jessica almost never called me. Messages, yes. Short updates, birthdays, holidays. But calls? Not really. Till I answered. Hello. Her voice came through bright. Unusually bright. Hi, Carol. I pulled the phone slightly away and frowned just a little. Jessica? Is everything all right? Oh, everything's great, she said quickly, almost rushing the words. Actually, it's better than great. The baby, the doctor says it could be any day now. And just like that, everything shifted. Oh, that's wonderful, I said, and my voice softened without me trying. For months, I had been quietly waiting for this moment. Not pushing, not interfering, just hoping I would be included somehow. Then she said the words I wasn't expecting. We want you here. I froze. Come again. We want you here when the baby comes, she repeated, her tone softer now, almost sweet. It just wouldn't feel right without you. Wouldn't feel right without me. That line stayed in my head for a long second. Because in 5 years Jessica had never spoken to me like that. Not cold exactly, but never warm either. Never like I mattered that much. I leaned against the counter trying to make sense of it. Are you sure? Of course I'm sure, she laughed. You're going to be such an important grandmother. Important. That word landed deeper than I expected. A small part of me hesitated. Something about her tone felt too smooth, too perfect. But another part of me, the louder part, didn't want to question it. Didn't want to ruin something that finally felt right. I'd love to come, I said quietly. Perfect. Drive safe, okay? We can't wait to see you. The call ended just like that. I stood there in my kitchen still holding the phone. The silence afterward felt different now, not empty anymore. Just full of something I hadn't felt in a while. Excitement. I smiled slowly. Hi, grandson, I whispered to myself. That word felt new in my mouth. Soft. Almost fragile. I hadn't allowed myself to dream too much about this moment before. I didn't want to be pushy, didn't want to step into their space uninvited. But now I had been asked. That changed everything. I started planning immediately. I checked the distance first. 15 hours from Phoenix to Denver. I actually let out a soft laugh. 15 hours. That's fine. It didn't feel long. Not when it meant finally being part of something. Packing took longer than it should have. I changed outfits more times than I could count. No, not that, too formal. This one? Maybe. I caught myself smiling at the mirror at one point. Carol, you're going to meet a baby, not attend an event. I wanted to look nice. I even bought a small gift. A baby blanket. Light blue, soft, simple. When I ran my hand across it, something inside me settled. This was real. I was finally going to meet him. The night before the trip, sleep didn't come easily. Not because I was worried, but because my mind wouldn't slow down. I kept imagining him. What he would look like. Whether he would cry loudly or softly. Whether I would get to hold him right away. I laughed quietly in the dark at one point. Listen to yourself, I whispered. But I didn't stop imagining. I left before sunrise. The road was still and empty, and the sky was only just beginning to lighten. As I drove, there was a calmness at first. Music played softly, old songs from years ago, and memories came back without asking permission. David as a child. His small hand gripping mine. His voice calling Mom, like it was the most natural thing in the world. That memory stayed with me longer than I expected. Time changes things. You don't notice it day by day, but one day you realize you're no longer in the center of someone's life. You're somewhere off to the side watching. But this trip, it felt like maybe I was stepping back in again. That's what I believed. 6 hours into the drive, I stopped for gas. My phone rang again. Just checking on you, she said cheerfully. I'm doing fine, I told her. About halfway there. Good. Drive safe. We're really excited. There was that word again. Excited. Her voice sounded perfect, but something about it didn't sit quite right. It lingered in my head after the call ended. Huh. I shook it off quickly. Don't overthink this, I told myself. Everything's fine. Later I tried calling David. He didn't pick up. Jessica answered again. He's resting, she said. Resting? Is everything okay? Oh yes, just tired. You know how it is. I hesitated for a second. Right, of course. But the truth was I didn't know how it was. I just wanted to hear my son's voice. So, as the drive continued and the hours stretched, the road became heavier somehow. The sky darkened, the mountains rose, and the quiet around me started to feel a little different. There was a moment, just a small one, where a thought slipped in. What if something isn't right? I tightened my grip on the steering wheel and pushed the thought away almost immediately. No, I murmured. They invited you. Everything is fine. By the time I reached the city, it was well past midnight. The parking lot of the hospital was quiet, almost too quiet. I turned off the engine and sat there for a moment. I made it, I said under my breath, and a small, tired smile appeared on my face. 15 hours. I stepped out into the cool night air and looked at the building ahead. Bright lights. Silent windows. A place where something new was about to begin. Inside everything felt calm, controlled. A nurse at the desk pointed me toward the maternity ward without much discussion. Room 314, she said. I thanked her and started walking down the hallway. My steps felt lighter with each second. My heart started beating faster. This was it. The moment I had been waiting for. Then I saw him. David. Standing outside the room, pacing. Relief rushed through me instantly. David, I started. He turned, and something in his face stopped me. There was no smile. No relief. Just tension. Not the kind you expect from someone about to become a father. This was different. Mom, he said. And then the words came out. What are you doing here? I didn't answer right away. Because I genuinely didn't understand the question. I came because... I hesitated, confused, hurt already rising in my chest. Jessica called me. She said you both wanted me here. He looked away for a second. That was all it took. That one small movement. Something inside me dropped. Because in that moment, I knew something was wrong. Very wrong. What my son said next didn't just confuse me. It broke something I didn't even know could break. And in that second I realized I hadn't been invited into a family moment. I had been pulled into something much darker. I stood there for a moment just looking at him, trying to understand what I had just heard. What do you mean, what am I doing here? I asked, my voice softer than I expected. Jessica called me. She said you both wanted me here for the baby. David didn't answer right away. He glanced at the door behind him. Then back at me. Then away again. That hesitation, it was small but it said everything. Mom, he let out a breath and rubbed the back of his neck. You weren't supposed to come tonight. A strange chill ran through me. Not supposed to come? I repeated slowly. I've been driving for 15 hours, David. I know, he said quickly, almost too quickly. It's just, things changed. Things changed. Just like that. No explanation. No warning. Just those two words. I stared at him, trying to keep my voice steady. Changed how? He shifted uncomfortably, lowering his voice. Jessica doesn't want anyone here. I blinked. Anyone? She wants it to be just us, he continued. No family right now. The doctor said stress could affect the delivery and she's already overwhelmed. I let out a quiet breath, almost like a small laugh that didn't feel like laughter at all. Oh. That single word carried more than I intended. Because at that moment, everything started rearranging itself in my mind. The excitement. The invitation. The warmth in her voice. And this. Standing outside a door. Being told I wasn't wanted. But she called me, I said, still trying to make sense of it. She told me to come. She said she wanted me here. David looked conflicted. Really conflicted. I know, he said quietly. She just changed her mind. Changed her mind. So easily. So completely. I looked at the door behind him. Just a few steps away. On the other side, my grandson was about to be born. A moment I had been waiting for, quietly, patiently. No. I wasn't allowed to even stand nearby. I'm not asking to go inside, I said, my voice barely above a whisper now. I just want to be here. I can sit in the waiting room. I won't bother anyone. David let out a tired breath. It's not about bothering Mom. He's just really firm about this. She doesn't want any family around. Family. That word stung more than anything else. I looked at him carefully. I'm not any family, David. He swallowed, clearly uncomfortable, but he didn't argue. That hurt even more. For a second I thought he might change his mind. Might say, you know what, come sit with me. Might stand beside me instead of standing between me and that door. But he didn't. Instead, he nodded slightly toward the hallway. Maybe you should go rest. You look exhausted. I'll call you when the baby is here. There was the quiet dismissal, wrapped in something that almost sounded like concern. I nodded slowly. Right, of course. I guess I'll do that. I stood there for another second, waiting, maybe for him to stop me. He didn't. So I turned. And I walked away. The hallway felt longer this time. Heavier. Each step echoing louder than it should have. 15 hours. I replayed that number in my head over and over again. 15 hours of driving. 15 hours of hope. And all of it ended in a hallway, being told I wasn't needed. I reached the elevator and pressed the button. My hands felt strangely cold. When the doors opened, I stepped in and leaned back against the wall, staring at nothing. What just happened? I didn't cry. Not yet. Sometimes the hurt comes later. First comes the confusion. The quiet disbelief. The parking garage was almost empty when I got back to my car. I sat inside for a long minute, hands resting on the steering wheel again, just like they had been hours ago. Except now. They felt heavier. I let out a slow breath. Hey. I wasn't angry. Not yet. Just hurt. And tired. Very, very tired. The hotel room felt too quiet. I dropped my bag near the door and sat on the bed without even turning on the television. For a few minutes I just stared at the wall. Trying to replay everything. Trying to find where it stopped making sense. Jessica inviting me. Jessica sounding warm. Jessica insisting I come. And then suddenly, no one wanted me there. That doesn't just happen, I murmured. Something was off. It had to be. But every time I tried to follow that thought, I stopped myself. No. She's in labor. She's emotional. That must be it. I repeated those words like a shield, trying to protect myself from a different, more uncomfortable truth. Hours passed slowly. I don't even remember falling asleep. I just remember waking up suddenly and grabbing my phone. No calls. No messages. Nothing. I checked the time. Still early. Still waiting. So I stayed in that room, watching the clock, refreshing my phone again and again. Every small vibration made my heart jump. But it was never him. It wasn't until late morning that my phone finally rang. David. I answered immediately. Hello. There was a brief silence on the other end, then his voice came through, tired but lighter than before. Mom, he's here. For a moment. Everything else faded again. He's here. I repeated, sitting up straighter. Is he okay? He's perfect, David said quietly. 7 pounds. Everything went well. A small smile formed on my face before I could stop it. Congratulations, I said, and this time my voice trembled a little. When can I see him? There was a pause. Short, but heavy. Jessica's really tired, he said carefully. The delivery was hard. She needs some time. That small smile, it didn't disappear. But it weakened. Of course, I said. I understand. Maybe later today. Another pause. Maybe give us a day or two, he said. A day or two. I looked around the room slowly. I'm already here, David. I know, Mom. We appreciate that. Just give her a little time. Appreciate. Another word that didn't feel quite right. Like something polite. Distant. I see, I said quietly. After the call ended, I sat there holding my phone. Not moving. Not thinking. Just sitting. A day or two. I had driven 15 hours. And now I was being asked to wait. Long. Afternoon turned into evening. Evening into night. Still no message. No update. No photo. Nothing. The next day came. And went. The television played softly in the background, but I wasn't really watching it. I kept glancing at my phone. Maybe they're just busy, I told myself again. New baby, they need time. But another voice, quieter, sharper, started whispering something else. They don't want you there. I shook my head. No. But the thought didn't disappear. By the third morning, something inside me had changed. Not completely, but enough. The waiting didn't feel patient anymore. Felt intentional. I stood up slowly. All I need is to see him, I said to myself. I don't need to stay. I don't need to hold him. Just one look. That didn't feel like too much to ask. Not after everything. So I grabbed my keys. And I drove back to the hospital. And that's where things became undeniable. I thought the worst part was being turned away at the door. But when I got to the hospital that morning, I discovered something that made it very clear. I hadn't just been ignored. I had been completely erased. That morning felt different the moment I woke up. Not softer, not hopeful like the day before. Just heavy. Like something had already ended and I hadn't fully accepted it yet. I stood in front of the mirror for a second, fixing my hair out of habit, even though I wasn't sure why I still cared. Then I picked up my keys. All I'm asking for is one look, I said quietly. Just one. It sounded reasonable when I said it out loud. Simple. Small. I drove back to the hospital with that thought repeating in my mind, almost like I needed it to justify being there. The parking lot looked the same as the night before. Same quiet spaces. Same cold air. But it didn't feel the same. Not even close. Inside, the maternity floor was a little busier this time. Nurses walked back and forth. Soft voices. The sound of distant crying, newborns announcing themselves to the world. I walked straight to the desk. Hi, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. I'm here to see baby Nathan Martinez. He was born yesterday. The nurse at the desk looked at her computer. Her fingers moved across the keyboard, then she paused. Nathan Martinez, she repeated. Yes. Another pause. Then she looked up at me, her expression shifting slightly. Oh, I'm sorry, ma'am. They were discharged this morning. I blinked. Discharged? Yes, she said gently. They left earlier today. For a second I thought I heard her wrong. Left as in went home? That's correct. The words didn't hit all at once. They landed slowly. Piece by piece. They had left the hospital. Taken the baby home. Without telling me. Without calling me. Without even a message. Oh. That was all I managed to say. The nurse gave me a polite smile, the kind people use when they don't really know what else to do. Is there anything else I can help you with? I shook my head. No, thank you. I turned and walked away, but this time the hallway didn't just feel long. It felt empty. Completely empty. Like I had no reason to be there at all. Not anymore. Each step echoed louder than before, but now it wasn't just the sound. It was the realization settling in with every step. They didn't forget. People don't forget things like that. They chose not to tell me. I reached my car again, opened the door and sat down slowly. My hands rested in my lap this time, not on the steering wheel. I stared straight ahead. They went home. Sounded strange even now. Unreal. And then finally, the hurt came. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just quiet and deep. The kind that sits in your chest and doesn't move. I picked up my phone and called David. He answered after a few rings. Mom. You went home, I said. I didn't ask it as a question. I already knew. There was a pause on the line. Yeah, he said carefully. Jessica wanted to be in her own space. His own space. I closed my eyes for a second. You didn't think to call me? I asked quietly. We were busy, he replied. Packing up, getting everything ready. I was 10 minutes away, I said. That stopped him. Just for a second. I didn't know you were coming today. Of course not. Because no one asked. No one checked. No one thought about me at all. I came because I've been waiting, I said, and now there was something in my voice I couldn't hide anymore. 3 days, David. I've been sitting in a hotel room for 3 days. I know, and we appreciate you being here, but what? I asked. He hesitated again. That hesitation, it was becoming familiar. Like he was constantly choosing his words. Or choosing sides. Jessica's still not ready for visitors, he said finally. Visitors. That word hit harder than I expected. I'm not a visitor, I said softly. I'm your mother. Silence. The kind that answers more than words ever could. He exhaled slowly. Mom, please. Just give her some time. How much time? I asked. I don't know. Maybe a few weeks. A few weeks. I actually let out a small, quiet laugh this time. Not because it was funny. Because I couldn't believe it. I drove 15 hours to be told to come back in a few weeks? It's not like that. It feels exactly like that, I said. I wasn't raising my voice. That's what made it worse. The calmness. The acceptance creeping in, right alongside the hurt. Look, he said, we'll send you pictures soon, okay? You'll see him. Pictures. I looked at my hand still holding the phone. I came to meet my grandson, I said. Not to see him on a screen. Another long pause. Then finally, almost like he was ending the conversation before it stretched any further. We'll call you soon, Mom. The silence afterward felt heavier than anything else that day. I lowered the phone slowly. Pictures, I repeated under my breath. I sat there for a while longer watching nothing. Thinking about everything. The invitation. The drive. The waiting, and now this. It all lined up too neatly. Too deliberately. This wasn't just stress. This wasn't just a new mother needing space. This felt planned. I drove back to the hotel one last time. Packed my bag. Folded the baby blanket I had brought so carefully. I held it for a moment before putting it away. Not today, I whispered. Then I checked out. No reason to stay anymore. No reason at all. The drive back felt longer. Much longer. The same road. But completely different. No music this time. No smiles. Just silence. And thoughts I couldn't push away anymore. She called you. She told you to come. So why? That question replayed over and over again. Until one answer started forming. Fully. Uncomfortably. She never wanted you there. I gripped the steering wheel tighter at that thought. No. But deep down, I was starting to believe it. I reached home late that night. Walked into the same quiet house. The same kitchen. Everything exactly as I had left it. I wasn't the same. I placed my bag down near the door and sat at the table. No tea this time. No routine. Just stillness. And then my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. But something told me to pick it up. Hello. A woman's voice came through, polite but official. Is this Carol Martinez? Yes. This is Denver General Hospital calling regarding the delivery charges for Jessica Martinez. We need to confirm how you would like to proceed with payment. For a second, I didn't understand what she had said. Payment. Yes, ma'am. You're listed as the financial guarantor for the delivery. The balance is. The rest of her sentence faded into the background. As something inside me snapped into focus. Oh. I said softly. And this time, it wasn't confusion. It was realization. In that moment, everything finally made sense. The invitation, the warmth, the sudden rejection, because I wasn't brought there as family. I was brought there for something else entirely. I didn't say anything at first. I just sat there at my kitchen table holding the phone, listening to that woman talk about charges as if this was the most normal conversation in the world. The total balance is $2,300 and we'll need to arrange payment as soon as possible, she said politely. Payment. For a moment I actually wondered if I had heard her wrong. I'm sorry, I said slowly, but there must be some mistake. There was a pause on the line followed by the soft clicking of keys. I have your name listed here, ma'am. Carol Martinez. You're registered as the financial guarantor for the delivery. That word again. Guarantor. I leaned back slightly in my chair, my fingers tightening around the phone. I didn't sign anything, I said. My voice was calm. Too calm. I wasn't even there, I added. I wasn't allowed to be there. Another pause. Well, according to our records, the forms were submitted electronically, she explained. The signature and personal details match your file. Something cold moved through me then. Not confusion. Not hurt. Something sharper. When exactly were these forms submitted? I asked. One moment. Yes, I have it here. November 15th, 11:47 p.m. November 15th. I closed my eyes. I knew exactly where I had been at that time. On the road. Somewhere in the middle of nowhere, driving through darkness, focusing on headlights and lane markers, making my way toward Denver. Heading toward them. And how were they submitted? I asked. Through our online portal, ma'am. Online. Of course. I let out a slow breath. Can you send me a copy of those forms? I said. Absolutely. I'll email them to you right now. Thank you, I replied. Then I hung up. I didn't move for several minutes. I just sat there staring at the table. It was quiet again in my house. Completely silent. But this silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full of something else. Understanding. Something had been wrong from the very beginning. I had felt it. I just didn't want to believe it. The email arrived 20 minutes later. My hands were steady when I opened it. That surprised me. I expected anger, panic, something loud. But what I felt instead was clarity. I opened the first document, and there was my name, my address, my information, even a signature. My signature, perfectly placed at the bottom. I stared at it for a long second. No, I whispered, because that wasn't my signature. Not really. It looked like mine. Close enough that no one would question it. But I knew. I hadn't signed anything. I kept reading. The form stated that I had agreed to take full financial responsibility for the delivery costs. That I had volunteered to do so. Volunteered. I let out a slow, controlled breath and leaned back in my chair. So that's it, I said quietly. I didn't need anyone to explain it to me. I didn't need more evidence. I already knew. She didn't just invite me to come. She invited me while using my name. While submitting these forms. While placing me exactly where she needed me to be. On the road. Unavailable. Distracted. Trusting. And then once I arrived, she made sure I couldn't get anywhere near the hospital. Made sure I stayed out of sight. Out of reach. Out of the way. Ha! I let out a quiet, humorless laugh. It wasn't funny. But there was something almost unbelievable about how neatly it all fit together. The invitation. The warmth. The rejection. The waiting. And now this. It wasn't random. It wasn't emotional. It was planned. I picked up the phone again and called the hospital back. This is Carol Martinez, I said when they answered. I need to report fraud. The word felt heavy, but certain. Fraud, the woman repeated. Yes, I said. I never signed those documents. My identity has been used without my consent. Her tone changed immediately. More serious now. Ma'am, I'm going to transfer you to our legal department. Please stay on the line. That's fine, I replied. I leaned back in my chair again as the hold music began playing softly. My mind didn't feel scattered anymore. Everything was lining up. Every detail. Every strange moment during that trip. Even her voice on the phone. Now it made sense. Too perfect. Too smooth. Because it wasn't real. While I waited, I reached for my phone again and started pulling up everything I could. Messages from Jessica. The call logs. Photos I had taken during the drive. Time stamped. Proof of where I was and when. I moved carefully, methodically. Like I had done years ago when I worked. Slow. Precise. Focused. Because this wasn't confusion anymore. This was something else. Something solid. Something I could deal with. A new voice came onto the line. Mrs. Martinez, this is the hospital legal department. I understand you're reporting fraud. Yes, I said, and this time my voice carried no hesitation at all. And I have documentation to support it. And for the next hour I told them everything. The call. The drive. The hospital. Being turned away. Every detail. I didn't rush. I didn't exaggerate. I just told the truth. When the call ended, I sat back again. I allowed myself to breathe. Really breathe. Because the confusion was gone. The hurt was still there. But now it had shape. And that changed everything. My phone buzzed again a few minutes later. A message. From David. Hope you got home safe. Jessica's doing well. The baby is great. We'll send pictures soon. I looked at the message for a long second. Then I typed back. Glad you're both all right. I'll wait to meet him. I read my own message once. Then sent it. He didn't need to know what I had just done. Not yet. I placed the phone down gently. Walked to the window. Looked out at the quiet street. The sun was setting slowly, painting everything in soft gold. And for the first time since that night at the hospital, I smiled. Not because I was happy, but because I understood. And once you understand something like this, you stop feeling lost. At that moment I thought I had uncovered everything. But what I didn't know yet was this was only the beginning, because the truth behind her actions wasn't just about money, it was far bigger, and far more dangerous than I could have imagined. That night I didn't sleep much. Not because I was overwhelmed, not anymore. It was something else. It was that quiet feeling you get when everything finally clicks into place. When all the confusion disappears, and what's left is truth. Hard cold truth. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying everything again, but this time the story looked different. Not like something that happened to me. Like something that had been arranged around me. Carefully. Deliberately. I exhaled softly in the dark. You really thought this through, didn't you? And somehow, that hurt more than anything else. The next morning my phone rang again. Denver number. I picked it up. Mrs. Martinez? Yes. This is the hospital legal department. I wanted to update you. We've reviewed your case and based on your statement and initial evidence, we are opening a formal fraud investigation. There was no hesitation, no doubt, just confirmation. I understand, I said calmly. In the meantime, she continued, you are not responsible for any charges related to this case until the investigation is complete. I almost smiled at that. Thank you, I said. I expected as much. There was a brief pause, like she wasn't expecting that answer. Mrs. Martinez, may I ask, do you know who might have submitted these forms? I looked out the window, watching the morning light slowly spread across the street. Yes, I said, and for the first time I said it out loud. My daughter-in-law. After the call ended, I sat quietly for a moment. Then I stood up, walked to the kitchen, made fresh tea. Actually drank it, fully, calmly, because something had changed inside me. The hurt was still there. It hadn't disappeared, but it had moved. It was no longer sitting in my chest. It was behind me now. And in front of me was something else entirely. By midday another call came in. Different tone this time. Stronger. More official. Mrs. Martinez, this is Detective Aaron Hughes with Denver Police. We're following up on the fraud report you filed with the hospital. I leaned back slightly in my chair. Yes, I've been expecting your call. I'm going to need you to walk me through everything, he said. From the beginning. And so I did. The phone call from Jessica. The sudden warmth. The invitation. The 15-hour drive. Being turned away at the hospital door. The days of waiting. And finally, the bill. I didn't rush through any of it. Every detail mattered now. Every small moment that didn't make sense before now had weight. When I finished, there was a silence on the line. Then he said, Mrs. Martinez, this doesn't look like a mistake. I let out a small breath. No, I said quietly. It doesn't. It looks intentional. Yes. Another pause. We're going to request access to hospital records, security footage and digital logs, he continued. If what you're saying checks out, this is a serious offense. Serious. I almost smiled again. I'm aware, I said. After the call I didn't feel shaken. I expected to, but I didn't. I felt steady. Stronger than I had felt in days. Because this was no longer a situation where I was being pushed aside or ignored. This was something real. Something official. Something that couldn't be brushed away with polite words like, give us time, or we'll send pictures. My phone buzzed later that afternoon. David. Of course. I stared at his name for a few seconds before answering. Hello. Mom, what's going on? His voice sounded tense. Worried. I stayed quiet for a moment. What do you mean? We just got a call from the hospital, he said quickly. They're saying there's some kind of investigation. Something about fraud? There was. Right on time. I leaned back slightly in my chair. Yes, I said. Silence. Then, what? I was listed as the financial guarantor for the delivery, I explained calmly. Without my consent. That doesn't make sense, he said immediately. There has to be some mistake. No, I replied softly. There isn't. Another pause. Longer this time. You're saying Jessica did this? He asked, his voice lowering. I'm saying my information was used while I was driving to Denver, I said carefully. And I didn't authorize it. That's insane, he said. She wouldn't. She already did, I said, not raising my voice, not pushing, just stating it. I heard him exhale sharply. Mom, there has to be an explanation. Of course there did. There always is. Just not always a good one. That's what the investigation will determine, I said. You reported her? He asked a little more sharply now. I paused, then answered honestly. I reported fraud, I said. What happens next depends on the truth. Silence. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Then in the background, I heard her. Her voice, strained, panicked, whispering something I couldn't make out clearly. David moved away from the phone slightly. I could hear their voices overlapping. Fast. Tense. Then he came back. Mom. She says this is a misunderstanding. I let out a quiet breath. Of course she does. She said she might have listed you as an emergency contact or something and... David, I interrupted gently. He stopped. I've seen the documents, I said. This isn't a form mix-up. This is a financial agreement. He didn't respond right away. And in that silence, I could feel it. The shift. The first small crack in his certainty. She wouldn't do that, he said, but now his voice wasn't as sure. I didn't reply immediately. But sometimes, silence speaks louder. When I finally spoke again, my voice was softer. Did you know she didn't want me at the hospital before I arrived? There was a pause. And that pause gave me my answer before he even spoke. Yes, he admitted quietly. I closed my eyes for a brief second. There it was. Out in the open. So you knew, I said. Not accusing. Just confirming. I didn't think she'd go this far, he added quickly. This far. That told me he knew more than he was saying. But I didn't push. Not yet. David, I said gently, you need to start asking the right questions. After that, the call ended not with anger, but with something worse. Doubt. I sat in my chair for a long time after that. The house quiet again. The same house I had returned to after that long drive. But now, everything had changed. Because this wasn't just about me anymore. This was bigger. Far bigger. And I could feel it now. Something underneath all of this. Something much deeper than a hospital bill. I thought I was dealing with one betrayal. But that conversation with my son made something very clear. This wasn't just about Jessica anymore. This was about secrets that had been hidden for far longer than I realized. After that call with David, the house didn't feel quiet anymore. It felt waiting. Like something was coming. I went about the rest of the day normally, at least on the outside. I cleaned a little. Put things back in place. Tried to carry on as if everything hadn't just shifted meaning. But inside, something had already changed. That small moment on the phone, when he admitted he knew. Yes. It kept echoing in my head. He knew. He knew I wasn't wanted at the hospital, and he still let me drive all that way. I sat down slowly at the kitchen table again. Why would you do that? I asked quietly, even though he wasn't there to answer. And then another thought followed right behind it. What else don't you know? The next morning my phone rang early. I picked it up before even checking the number. Mrs. Martinez, this is Detective Hughes again. Yes, I said, straightening slightly. We've started reviewing the hospital records and digital access logs. There's something you should know. Something in his voice made my chest tighten. What is it? The forms submitted under your name. He paused briefly as if choosing his words carefully. They weren't done from a personal device. I frowned slightly. Then from where? From inside the hospital. I leaned back slowly in my chair. Inside. Yes. From a workstation in the family lounge area. That image formed instantly in my mind. The hospital. The waiting area. Computers sitting in quiet corners. People coming and going. And someone sitting there, using my name, while I was still on the road, trying to get there. That means, I started. That means whoever submitted them had physical access, he finished. And the timing aligns very closely with when your daughter-in-law was admitted. I closed my eyes for a second. Of course it did. Do you have proof? I asked quietly. We're in the process of obtaining security footage, he said. But based on the timeline, she is the primary person of interest. Primary. He said it carefully, professionally. But there was no doubt in what he meant. After the call ended, I sat there again. Not shocked. Not even surprised anymore. Just certain. The picture was getting clearer. Piece by piece. And each piece made it harder to pretend this was anything but deliberate. Later that afternoon another call came. But this time, it wasn't from the police. It was from David. I stared at the screen for a moment before answering. Hello. He didn't greet me this time. Mom, they're saying Jessica could get into serious trouble. There was fear in his voice now. Real fear. I took a slow breath. That depends on what the investigation finds, I replied. They're talking about charges, he continued, his words slightly rushed. Actual charges. I didn't interrupt him. I let him say it, because I knew what he was really asking. What do you want me to do? He said finally. I looked down at my hands resting on the table. I want you to understand what happened, I said calmly. She didn't mean it like that, he said quickly. She was stressed, she just had a baby, things got mixed up. David, I spoke gently but firmly this time. He stopped. This wasn't done in a moment of panic, I said. This was done while she was speaking to me, inviting me to come. Silence. She knew exactly what she was doing. You don't know that, he insisted, but his voice had already softened. I do, I said quietly. Because I did. And deep down. So did he. There was movement on his end of the call. A door closing. Then lower voices again. Jessica. I could hear her even if I couldn't understand the words. Quick. Almost desperate. David came back. She says she made a mistake filling out the forms, he said. She thought she was putting you down as a contact, not the one responsible. I let out a slow breath. That's not how those forms work. I know, but no, I said quietly, cutting in again. I worked in this field for 35 years. Those forms are very clear. He didn't respond. Because that was something he couldn't argue with. Time stretched on the call again. Then he said, softer now. What's going to happen to her? That question felt different. Not defensive. Not argumentative. Just scared. I looked out the window again. The light was fading slowly. I don't decide that, I said. The investigation will lead where it leads. But you started this, he said, not accusing, just stating. I thought about that for a moment. No, I said finally. She did. Another silence. Longer this time. He's just a baby, Mom, David said quietly. He needs his mother. That line, it landed. Of course it did. I closed my eyes briefly. I know, I said. And I needed my son, I added softly. The words slipped out before I could stop them. He didn't respond right away. Because both of us knew what I meant. When the call finally ended, I set the phone down slowly. This time, there was something else there. Not just clarity. Not just understanding. But distance. A distance I hadn't felt before. Because now it wasn't just about Jessica. It was about David's choices too. What he chose to see. What he chose to ignore. And what he chose to defend. That evening I went through the documents again. Carefully. Looking at every detail. Every timestamp. Every line. And something small caught my eye. A line that had been there from the beginning. But didn't stand out until now. Relationship to patient. Mother. Maternal. I stared at it. Maternal. That didn't just look wrong. It was wrong. Jessica's mother lived in another state. I wasn't the maternal grandmother. I was the paternal one. Which meant, she didn't just use my name. She changed the story. Completely. I leaned back slowly. She didn't just sign forms. She built a narrative. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just about money. This was about planning. Careful, deliberate planning. The kind that doesn't happen overnight. The kind that takes thought. Time. Intention. I looked at the document one more time. Then quietly folded it. Placed it on the table. And whispered, "What else have you done?" At that point I thought I understood the situation, but that single detail on the form made one thing very clear. This wasn't the first time she had done something like this, and I was about to find out just how far it really went. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was restless, but because my mind wouldn't stop connecting things. That one word on the form, maternal, it stayed with me. It wasn't a mistake. Not the kind you make casually or by accident. It was too specific. Too deliberate. She hadn't just used my name. She rewrote who I was. And that meant something much bigger than a simple fraud. It meant she needed the story to fit. And when someone starts adjusting the truth to that level, you have to ask yourself why. The next morning, I woke up with that same thought still sitting quietly in my chest. What else? It was no longer if something was wrong. It was how much. I made coffee, but it went cold before I drank it. My hands stayed still on the table as I stared out the window, thinking. Jessica had always been careful. Not cold, not distant in an obvious way. She knew how to be polite, knew when to smile, when to speak. But now, when I replayed every interaction we'd ever had, it felt different. Like I had been looking at something surface level all along. And only now, I was starting to see underneath it. By mid-morning, my phone rang again. Detective Hughes. Mrs. Martinez, we've reviewed the initial footage. I straightened slightly. And there was a small pause. We have her on video. The words landed quietly, but heavily. In the hospital lounge, he continued, using one of the terminals. The timing matches exactly with the submission of the forms under your name. I closed my eyes for a brief second. Not out of disbelief. Out of confirmation. Thank you for letting me know, I said calmly. That's not all, he added. Something in his tone shifted just slightly. There are indicators that this may not be an isolated situation. My fingers tightened slightly on the edge of the table. What do you mean? We're noticing patterns in the digital logs, he explained. Repeated use of similar data entries. Not just yours. Other names linked to the same patient profile over time. Other names. I leaned forward slowly. Are you saying other people could be involved? We don't have full confirmation yet, he said carefully, but we are expanding the investigation. Expanding. That word carried weight. It meant this wasn't just about me anymore. After the call ended, I sat very still. The house felt different again. Heavier. Quieter. But not empty. Other people, I whispered. And suddenly a memory surfaced. A conversation. Months ago. Jessica had mentioned David's sister, Emma, once during a family dinner. Something about a credit card issue. At the time it sounded small. Confusing, but nothing serious. She said there was a mix-up. David had laughed it off. Banks mess things up all the time. I had nodded along. Because that's what you do. You don't assume the worst of family. You trust. Now sitting there with the phone still warm in my hand. That memory didn't feel small anymore. It felt connected. I stood up slowly. No. I walked to the living room and picked up my phone again. Scrolled through my contacts. And stopped on her name. Emma. I hesitated for just a moment. Then pressed call. She answered on the third ring. Aunt Carol. Her voice sounded surprised. Hi, sweetheart, I said gently. Wow, it's been a while, she said. Is everything okay? I smiled faintly, though she couldn't see it. That's what I'm trying to figure out, I replied. There was a small pause. What do you mean? I took a slow breath. Emma, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me, all right? Okay. That issue you had a few months ago, I said carefully. The credit card problem. What exactly happened? Silence. I could feel her hesitation through the phone. Then she let out a quiet breath. How do you know about that? Because it matters now, I thought. Just tell me, I said softly. Another pause. Then she spoke. I started getting statements for a card I never opened, she said. At first I thought it was some random identity theft thing. You know? It happens. Yes. But the information was too accurate, she continued. My full name, date of birth. Even security answers. Things only someone close would know. My chest tightened slightly. And what did you do? I called Jessica, she said. That made me pause. You called her? Yeah, Emma said quietly. I don't even know why. I think something in my gut just told me to. I didn't say anything. I let her continue. She acted surprised at first, Emma said. Then, she said it might have been an accident. That she was filling out something and maybe mixed up details. Mixed up. I closed my eyes slowly. I didn't push, Emma added. She seemed embarrassed. And she paid some of it off later. So I just let it go. Of course she did. Because that's what family does. We explain things away. We forgive before we fully understand. Emma, I said gently, that wasn't an accident. There was silence on the line again. A long one. What are you saying? I took a breath and told her everything. When I finished, I could hear her breathing on the other end, uneven now. No, she whispered. No, that can't be. I wish I was wrong, I said softly. She told me it was just a mistake, Emma said, her voice cracking slightly. She promised it would never happen again. There was the pattern. Not just action, but words. Promises. Control. I feel so stupid, she said quietly. No, I replied immediately. You trusted family. That's not stupidity. Another silence. Then she asked, barely above a whisper, what's going to happen now? I looked at the documents still sitting on my table. I said slowly, this is just the beginning. After I ended the call, I stood there for a long moment. Not moving. Because now it was clear. This wasn't a single act. This wasn't panic. This wasn't stress. This was a pattern. Careful. Controlled. Repeated. And somehow, I had just become the latest part of it. At that moment, I realized something that changed everything. I wasn't the first. And that meant one thing. There were others I didn't even know about yet. And whatever she had been doing, it had been going on for far longer than I ever imagined. After talking to Emma, I couldn't go back to thinking about this as something isolated. That illusion was gone. Completely. I walked back into the kitchen and sat down slowly, staring at the same set of documents on the table. They hadn't changed, but I had. Before, I was trying to understand what had happened to me. Now I was asking something else entirely. How many times has she done this? And to how many people? That question didn't leave me. It stayed there quietly, like a shadow that refused to move. I finished my coffee this time, even though it had gone cold again. Funny how habits stay the same even when everything else shifts. Then I reached for my phone. There was another name in my contact list that suddenly didn't feel so distant. Jake. David's cousin. We weren't especially close, but we saw each other during family gatherings. Enough to know each other. Enough to talk. Enough to matter. I hesitated for a second. Then I called. He picked up quickly. Hey, Aunt Carol. Everything okay? His tone had that casual warmth. The kind you only hear when someone has no idea what's coming. I hope so, I said gently. Well, that sounds serious, he said, half laughing. What's going on? I didn't answer right away. I had learned something already. You don't rush this kind of conversation. Jake, I said carefully, I need to ask you something and I need you to think before you answer. That changed his tone immediately. Okay. Have you ever had any financial issues recently? Anything unusual? Accounts, loans, charges that didn't quite make sense. There was silence. Short, but noticeable. Why? He asked. There was again that hesitation. I just need you to answer me, I said softly. Another breath on the line. Then, yeah, he admitted. My chest tightened slightly. What happened? I got approved for a car loan I never applied for, he said. At first I thought it was a scam email, but then I started getting paperwork. Real paperwork. I closed my eyes. Did you follow up on it? Of course, he said. I spent weeks sorting it out. They had all my information. Name, address, everything. And did they tell you how the application was submitted? Online, he said immediately. Of course. Always online. And who had access to that information? I asked quietly. Jake didn't answer right away. But I didn't need him to. Because I could hear it in his silence. That moment, when things start shifting in someone's mind. You're not asking this randomly, are you? He said slowly. No, I replied. Then I told him. Everything. By the time I finished, he didn't say anything for a long time. Then finally. No way. His voice had dropped. Lower. Heavier. She was the one who helped me once, he added. I was filling out some paperwork during a family visit and she offered to help organize things, remember passwords, security questions, stuff like that. I exhaled slowly. There was open access. Trust. Did you ever think anything of it? I asked. No, he said bluntly. Why would I? She's family. Family. That word again. Kept coming back, and every time it felt different. I didn't report it, Jake admitted. I thought maybe it was just some kind of mix-up. These things happen. Yes, I said quietly. That's what we all think the first time. The first time? He repeated. I didn't respond right away. As now we both understood. This wasn't just happening to people. This was happening through people. Jake, I said, you're not the only one. He didn't speak for a moment. Then, who else? That's what I'm trying to find out, I replied. After the call ended, I leaned back again. Fully. My body felt still. But my mind was moving faster than ever. Emma. Jake. Me. 3 people. Same pattern. Same method. Same approach. Trust, then access. Access, then use. Use, then excuse. I nodded to myself. No accidents. None of this was accidental. Later that evening my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't familiar. A number I didn't recognize. I let it ring once. Twice. Then answered. Hello. There was hesitation on the other end. Then a woman's voice. Is this Carol Martinez? Yes. This is Sarah Chin, she said. I'm with the hospital's fraud investigation unit. Her tone was calm, but there was something firm underneath it. I've been reviewing your case. I straightened slightly in my chair. All right. We've verified the footage, she said. And we've confirmed the submission activity. I waited. Then she added. There's no doubt about it. No doubt. Those words settled heavily, but not painfully, as I already knew. But then she continued. And Mrs. Martinez, this situation may be larger than initially reported. Large. I almost smiled to myself. Of course it was. In what way? I asked. We're seeing indicators that similar patterns may exist in other cases connected to this individual, she explained. We are coordinating with law enforcement now. Coordinating. That meant one thing. This was no longer a small case. This was growing. Fast. After the call ended, I stood up and walked slowly to the window again. The street outside was calm. Peaceful. Unchanged. But I knew better now. Some things don't look dangerous at first. They move quietly, carefully, until suddenly, you realize how much ground they've already covered. I placed my hand on the window lightly and said to myself, you didn't just make a mistake, Jessica. You built something. No. That something was starting to come apart. At that moment I thought I had uncovered the full pattern. But what I didn't realize yet was this wasn't just about small fraud or scattered incidents. It was something far more organized. And the next call I received would prove that this story was bigger. Much bigger than any of us were prepared for. That evening stayed quiet. But it didn't feel calm. Not anymore. Felt like everything was slowly closing in. I had 3 names now. Jake and me. 3 separate situations. 3 different moments. But all connected by the same person. And the same pattern. I walked back to the kitchen table and sat down slowly, placing my phone next to the documents again. I didn't need to read them anymore. I knew what they said. What I didn't know was how far this went. The next morning answered that question. Or at least, part of it. My phone rang just after 9 a.m. Different number again. I answered. Mrs. Martinez? Yes. This is Agent Lisa Chen. I'm calling regarding the ongoing investigation connected to your fraud report. Agent. That word was different. Not hospital. Not local police. Something larger. I understand, I said, sitting a little straighter. Mrs. Martinez, I'm going to be very direct with you, she continued. The case involving your daughter-in-law has escalated. Escalated. My fingers tightened slightly. In what way? There is evidence suggesting a pattern of financial manipulation involving multiple individuals over an extended period, she said calmly. At this point, we are treating this as a multi-case fraud investigation. Multi-case. That was bigger than anything I had expected, even after everything I'd already learned. How many people? I asked quietly. There was a short pause. We currently have 5 confirmed individuals, including yourself. There may be more. I leaned back slightly in my chair. 5. Emma. Jake. Me. That meant at least 2 more people. 2 more who probably had no idea yet. Mrs. Martinez, Agent Chin continued, your case is particularly important because of how detailed the documentation was. It showed planning. Intent. Planning. Intent. Those words didn't feel new anymore. They felt confirmed. She continued explaining. Accounts opened under false authorization. Medical charges redirected. Loan applications submitted. Information gathered through personal relationships. And every time she spoke, the same image formed in my mind. Jessica, smiling at family gatherings, asking small questions, offering to help, quietly collecting details. No one questioning it. Because why would they? She was family. Have the other individuals been contacted? I asked. Yes, Agent Chen said. Some were aware of irregularities. Others were not. That sounds about right, I said under my breath. Mrs. Martinez, she added, we may need your continued cooperation as the case progresses. This is evolving quickly. You'll have it, I replied without hesitation, because at this point, there was no stepping back. Not anymore. After the call ended, I sat still for a long time. 5 people. 5 cases. And probably more beneath those. I thought about each of them. Emma, who blamed herself for trusting too easily. Jake, who thought it was just a random mistake. Me, standing outside a hospital door after driving 15 hours, not realizing what was already happening behind the scenes. I let out a slow breath. You didn't care who it was, I said softly. Anyone close enough, anyone trusting enough. Anyone who wouldn't question things until it was already done. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was David. I knew this conversation would come. I just didn't know how different it would feel. Mom, he said the moment I answered. His voice was different now. Not defensive. Not dismissive. He can talk to me, I said calmly. They're saying she could be charged with multiple counts, he said. They mentioned other people. Other cases. I don't understand. How is that possible? I closed my eyes briefly. You're starting to see it now, I said gently. I didn't know, he said quickly. I swear I didn't know about any of this. I believe you, I said. And I did. Because the confusion in his voice. It wasn't fake. She told me it was a misunderstanding, he continued. That everything would clear up. That it was just paperwork mistakes. I let out a soft breath. That's what she told everyone. Silence. Everyone, he repeated. Yes. That word settled heavily. Biz now. It wasn't just my realization. It was his. What am I supposed to do? He asked, quieter now. That question sounded very different than the last time he asked it. Before, it sounded like he wanted to fix things. Now, it sounded like he didn't know where to stand. You start by accepting what's in front of you, I said. And what's in front of me is, he hesitated. The truth, I finished calmly. There was a long silence after that. Then softly, I should have told you, he said. That night. At the hospital. I didn't respond right away. Because that moment, it still hurt. Just thinking about it. You should have, I said quietly. I didn't think it would get this bad, he admitted. And there it was again. That phrase. This bad. That meant he always knew something wasn't right. He just didn't expect it to go this far. David, I said gently, this didn't become something overnight. No response. It was already there, I added. When the call ended, I placed the phone down slowly. The house felt heavy again. But now, it wasn't just mine. This weight had spread. To everyone. I stood up and walked to the window once more. Outside, everything looked normal. Cars passed. People moved through their day. No one would guess that behind one quiet family, something like this had been unfolding for years. I folded my arms lightly and whispered, you didn't just hurt one person. You built an entire web. No. That web was breaking apart. Thread by thread. At that moment, I thought we were finally uncovering the truth. But what Agent Chin told me next made everything even darker. Because what Jessica had done to our family wasn't even the full story yet. That afternoon stayed with me in a way the others hadn't. Not because of what I already knew, but because of what I could feel was still missing. There was a piece of the story that hadn't surfaced yet. Something underneath all of this. And I didn't have to wait long for it. It was early evening when my phone rang again. Same number. Agent Chen. I picked it up immediately. Mrs. Martinez. Yes. Her voice sounded different this time. More serious. More focused. I need to update you on a development in the investigation, she said. I didn't speak. I just listened. While analyzing financial records connected to the existing cases, we uncovered something that changes the scope of this situation. Scope. The word made my chest tighten slightly. In what way? There was a brief pause. Then she said it. This may not have been done alone. I didn't respond right away. Because those words, they shifted everything. You mean someone helped her? Yes, she said. At this stage, we believe there may be another individual involved. Possibly someone with experience in these kinds of activities. Experience. That word sat differently than anything else. Because it didn't suggest panic. Or even intention. It suggested knowledge. Practice. I leaned back slowly in my chair. So this wasn't just her making bad decisions. No, Agent Chen replied. The level of coordination we're seeing, the timing, the methods, the access points, it suggests guidance. Guidance. Someone had taught her. Or worked with her. That realization hit quietly, but deeply. Because suddenly, Jessica didn't look like someone acting alone anymore. She looked like part of something. Do you know who it is? I asked. We have a name, Agent Chen said. There was a pause before she continued. But we're still verifying involvement, so I can't confirm details yet. I nodded slowly, even though she couldn't see me. Of course. This was bigger now. Careful steps mattered. But Mrs. Martinez, she added, there's something else you need to understand. The way she said that, it made me straighten immediately. This individual has been connected to similar patterns in other cases. Other cases. Not just ours. Not just our family. Something colder moved through me. How many? Still under review, she said. But enough to suggest this may be part of a repeating structure. Repeating structure. That wasn't just fraud anymore. That was a system. After the call ended, I sat there, hands folded together, staring down at nothing. A system. Not random. Not emotional. Structured. That meant planning beyond a single family. Beyond a single situation. Suddenly, small details returned. The way Jessica always seemed to know exactly what to say. The way she built trust so easily. The way she never overdid anything, never gave people a reason to question her. It felt less like personality now, and more like method. I stood up slowly and walked around the room. Each step quiet. Measured. As now. I wasn't just thinking about what she did. I was thinking about who she really was. And whether the version we knew was the real one at all. My phone buzzed again. David. I answered, but this time, I already knew the conversation would be different. Mom. His voice was low. Tired. I talked to them, he said. The investigators. I waited. They told me there might be someone else involved. I let out a quiet breath. Yes, I said. I know. There was a long pause. Then, I don't even know who I married. That line came out slowly. Heavy. Honest. I didn't respond right away. Because there was nothing to soften that truth. It was exactly what he said it was. She never told me about anyone else, he added. No names. No past connections. Nothing. Did she ever avoid certain topics? I asked gently. Another pause. Yes. Like what? Her life before we met, he said. She never really went into detail. Just surface things. I never pushed. Of course he didn't. Because trust doesn't ask for proof. Not in the beginning. And now? I asked quietly. Now silence filled the space. Then, now everything feels like a lie. I closed my eyes briefly. Was that feeling? I knew it. Maybe not in the same way. But I knew it. David, I said carefully, you didn't miss something obvious. He didn't respond. You trusted someone who didn't give you a reason to question them, I continued. That's not a failure. That's how trust works. He let out a slow breath on the other end. But it still feels like I should have seen something, he said. Sometimes, I replied softly, people only show you what you're meant to see. There was a long pause. Then, what happens if this goes further? He asked. I looked out the window again. The sky was darker now. The day almost gone. Then it goes further, I said. Simple. Clear. No other way around it. After we ended the call, I stood there for a while. Thinking. Not about what had already happened. But about what was still coming. Because now I knew something for sure. This wasn't near the end. It wasn't even close. I walked back to the table and picked up one of the documents again, looked at it carefully. Every line, every detail, every piece of something that once felt confusing, now felt intentional. And quietly I said, "You didn't just target us. You chose us." That was the difference. And it mattered. More than anything. At that moment, I thought I was finally beginning to understand what we were dealing with. But what I didn't realize yet was this wasn't just a scheme or a pattern. It was something far more calculated. And very soon, we were about to discover just how carefully our family had been chosen. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about one word. Chosen. It echoed quietly in my mind over and over again. Not random. Not convenient. Chosen. I sat at the table long after the house went still, my fingers resting lightly against the documents, but not really seeing them anymore. Because now I wasn't looking at what she did. I was trying to understand why she chose us. The answer started coming the next morning. Another call. Agent Chin again. Her voice was steady as always, but there was something underneath it now, something more definite. "Mrs. Martinez, we've made progress identifying the second individual connected to this case." I didn't speak right away. I just listened. "We have reason to believe this person has been active in coordinating similar activities across multiple locations." Coordinating. That word confirmed everything I had been thinking. "So this isn't just someone helping her," I said slowly. "No," Agent Chin replied. "This appears to be someone with experience, someone who may have guided, trained, or influenced her actions." My hand tightened slightly against the edge of the table. "Do you know who it is?" "We have a name," she said. There was a small pause before she added. "Marcus Webb." The name didn't mean anything to me at first. But the way she said it, measured, careful, told me it should. "Who is he?" I asked. "Based on our preliminary findings," she said, "he has a history tied to financial manipulation and identity misuse. We're currently investigating his connection to your daughter-in-law." History. That meant this didn't start with us. Didn't start with Jessica. It started long before. "Mrs. Martinez," Agent Chin continued, "there's another detail you need to be aware of." I straightened slightly. "This individual appears to have researched your family specifically." I frowned. "Researched us?" "Yes," she said. "Financial patterns, family structure, employment stability, personal connections." I felt something shift inside me then. Not just realization. Something deeper. They didn't just act when they had the opportunity. They prepared. "That appears to be the case," she confirmed. After the call ended, I sat there, very still. My family. Looked at. Studied. Measured. All the small details that feel private. All the things you don't think twice about sharing over the years. Where you live. What you do. Who you trust. All of it gathered. Without us ever realizing it. Suddenly, Jessica's presence in our lives didn't feel natural anymore. It felt placed. The way she met David. The way she blended in so easily. The way she earned trust without ever asking for it. I exhaled slowly. This wasn't coincidence. My phone rang again not long after. "David." I answered quietly. "Mom." His voice sounded tired, but sharper now. "I just got off the phone with someone from the investigation team," he said. "They mentioned a name. Marcus Webb. So they had told him too." "Yes," I said. "Do you know who that is?" he asked. "No," I replied. "But we're about to find out." There was a pause. Then, "They said he may have known Jessica before we met." That landed heavily. "Oh. Not during. Not after." "Oh." I sat forward slightly. "David, did she ever talk about her past?" "Not really," he admitted. "Just general things. Nothing detailed. I never thought." "I know," I said softly. He didn't need to explain. None of us had thought. "They're saying he might have been involved for years," David continued. "Years, Mom." I closed my eyes briefly. Years. That meant this wasn't a recent development. This wasn't something that came from stress or a sudden situation. This was history. "I keep thinking back," David said quietly. "Trying to remember something, anything that didn't feel right." "And?" I asked gently. "There were moments," he admitted. "Small ones. Things that didn't quite add up. But nothing big enough to question." That's how it works, I thought. Nothing big. Just small things. small enough to ignore. Until they become everything. David, I said carefully, you were never supposed to see it. Silence. They don't show you the truth at the beginning, I added. They build something you believe first. He didn't respond right away. Because he understood now. More than before. They chose me, didn't they? He said finally. That question, it carried weight. Yes, I answered quietly. Why? He asked. I looked down at my hands. Then spoke slowly. You were stable. Predictable. You trusted easily. And you gave her access without realizing it. It sounded cold. But it was the truth. Another silence. Then, and you? He asked. I let out a small breath. I was never the main target. That realization came easily now. I was the second step. When the call ended, I stayed sitting there letting all of it settle. Because now the picture was clear. Not just what happened, but how it happened. A plan. A process. A system built around trust. And the most unsettling part was how natural it all looked from the outside. I stood up slowly and walked to the window again. The street looked the same. Nothing had changed out there. But everything inside our lives had. I rested my hand lightly against the glass and said quietly, you didn't just become part of this family. You entered it. No. We were finally seeing what had been there all along. At that moment, I thought we had uncovered the full truth behind Jessica's actions. But what we learned next would shake everything even further. Because the man behind all of this wasn't just connected to her past, he was still very much a part of her present. That thought stayed with me long after the call ended. Still part of her present. Not past. Not something she had walked away from. Still there. Still connected. I stood by the window for a long time just watching the street, but I wasn't really seeing anything outside. My attention had turned inward now, searching through every memory I had of Jessica, and trying to understand what had been real. The answer kept coming back the same. Very little. Later that night I received another call. This time, it was different. Not just an update. A warning. Agent Chen's voice was calm, but there was a firmness underneath it that hadn't been there before. Mrs. Martinez, we've confirmed ongoing communication between Jessica and Marcus Webb. I didn't move. Ongoing. Yes, she said. Recent communication. As in the past few weeks. The past few weeks. That meant one thing immediately. This didn't stop when she got married, I said quietly. No, Agent Chen confirmed. It appears it never stopped. That realization landed hard. Silently. Because suddenly everything shifted again. This wasn't about someone with a troubled past trying to move on. This was about someone living two lives at the same time. Do you know how they were communicating? I asked. Encrypted messaging, secondary accounts, and unregistered devices, she replied. This was not casual contact. This was intentional concealment. I exhaled slowly. So she was hiding it. Yes. No hesitation. No doubt. The room felt colder somehow. Because now the deception wasn't just about actions. It was about consistency. Daily choices. Repeated decisions to lie. And to continue lying. And there's something else, Agent Chen added. That phrase again. Each time she said it, the situation became heavier. We've recovered partial transcripts of their conversations. I turned slightly, leaning against the table. And she paused. Carefully, like she was measuring how much to say. The discussions suggest coordination. Not just general contact, but planning. Instructions. Updates. Planning. That word again. Only now, it carried even more weight. Because now it wasn't just assumed. It was confirmed. They weren't reacting, I said quietly. They were preparing. That is consistent with what we're seeing. After the call ended, I remained standing there, one hand resting on the table, my mind trying to catch up with what I had just heard. Communication. Planning. Coordination. All while living under the same roof as my son. All while carrying a child. All while smiling, talking, and building trust. It wasn't just deception anymore. It was control. Careful, maintained, deliberate control. My phone rang again only minutes later. David. I knew immediately he had been contacted too. I answered without hesitation. Mom. His voice was tight. Uneasy. They told me about the messages, he said. Yes. They showed me some of it, he added, his voice lowering. Not everything, but enough. I didn't speak. I let him continue. They were talking about finances, details about the family, even you. That didn't surprise me anymore. But hearing it out loud, it still carried weight. She mentioned your retirement accounts, he said quietly. She knew exact figures. I closed my eyes slowly. Of course she did. She had access. She had time. And I had never thought to hide anything from family. Mom, his voice softened suddenly. How long has this been going on? That question. It echoed in my own mind as well. I don't know, I said honestly. But long enough to be comfortable. Long enough to make it routine. Long enough to make it second nature. I feel like I've been living with a stranger, he said. That line came out heavier than anything he had said before. Not confused. Not defensive. Just broken. I know, I replied quietly. And I did. Not in the same way. But enough to understand the weight of it. She was sitting next to me, sending those messages, he added. The image formed immediately. Jessica sitting calmly in a living room. Phone in hand. Smiling. While writing something entirely different. That contrast. That double life. It wasn't easy to accept. David, I said softly, you believed what you were shown. He let out a slow breath. It all felt real, he admitted. Every moment, it felt real. And that was the hardest part. Because when something feels real for long enough, you stop questioning it completely. We stayed on the phone longer than usual that night. Not arguing. Not explaining. Just trying to understand. Piece by piece. After the call ended, I sat down again. Fully. Because now something else had settled in. Not confusion. Not even anger. Just clarity. She hadn't just lied once. She had lived inside the lie. Every day. Every interaction. Every decision. I looked down at the table, at nothing in particular, and said quietly, you didn't lose control. You were always in control. And that changed everything. At that moment, I thought I finally understood the depth of her deception. But what we uncovered next would reveal something even darker. Because those messages weren't just about money or information, they were leading to something far more serious than any of us had prepared for. That night felt heavier than all the others. Not because of what we already knew, but because of what was starting to come into view. Those messages. They weren't random. They weren't emotional outbursts or desperate decisions. They were calm, controlled, planned. And that meant something else was coming. The next morning, I didn't even feel surprised when my phone rang again. It was Agent Chin. I answered quietly. Mrs. Martinez. Yes. Her tone was steady, but there was something tightened beneath it. We've completed a deeper analysis of the communications between Jessica and Marcus Webb. I held the phone a little tighter. And there was a pause. Just long enough to know, whatever came next was important. They weren't just discussing financial activity. I stayed silent. They were discussing timeline movements. Timeline. That word didn't belong in something ordinary. What kind of movements? I asked slowly. Another pause. Plans involving relocation, she said. Relocation. My chest tightened slightly. As in, leaving? I asked. Yes, she replied. Leaving suddenly. Without notice. I didn't speak. Because I already knew what that meant. They had already begun preparing for it, she continued. Setting aside funds, discussing travel routes, creating fallback plans. Fallback plans. That wasn't desperation. That was preparation. Careful, detailed, intentional preparation. And Mrs. Martinez, Agent Chin added, her voice more serious now. There was mention of taking the child with them. Everything inside me went still. Taking Nathan? Yes. That single word, yes, felt louder than anything she had said before. I sat down slowly. My mind trying to process it. Not just fraud. Not just deception. This was something else entirely. They were planning to disappear, I whispered. That is our current understanding. My thoughts raced, but my voice stayed calm. And after that? That part is still under investigation, she said. But based on patterns we're seeing, this may not have been a one-time plan. One time. Meaning, repeatable. Meaning, intentional. After the call ended, I didn't move for a long time. I just sat there staring at the table trying to take it in. All those moments. All those conversations. Everything we thought was real. And all the while, something like this was being planned in the background. My phone started ringing again. David. I answered immediately. Mom. His voice sounded shaken in a way I hadn't heard before. They told me, he said. I didn't ask what. I already knew. They were planning to leave, he continued. With Nathan. Yes. Silence filled the space between us. Then, why? He asked. That word felt so small compared to the weight of the situation. But it was the only question that mattered. I took a slow breath. Because leaving meant control, I said. He didn't respond. Staying would mean being exposed, I continued. Leaving means starting over, with everything they've already taken. Another silence. Long. Heavy. They were going to take my son, he said quietly. The way he said it. Not in anger, not even disbelief. Just realization. It stayed with me. Yes, I replied softly. I was there, he whispered. Every day right there. And I had no idea. I didn't try to explain that. Because there was no explanation that would make it easier to accept. They talked about timing too, he said. After the birth, before things settled, before anyone noticed. That detail felt sharp. Precise. They chose that moment carefully, I said. Yeah, he breathed. There was a pause. Then he asked something that caught me off guard. What happens if they didn't get caught? That question. It hung in the air. Because it wasn't just hypothetical. It was real. Very real. I didn't answer immediately. Because the truth wasn't easy to say. Then they would have disappeared, I said quietly. And we wouldn't have known where Nathan went. Silence. Longer than before. And in that silence, we both understood something. Something difficult. That hospital call. That single moment. When I refused to accept the bill. When I questioned it. When I reported it. That moment. Changed everything. I almost let it go, I said softly. What? David asked. For a second, I admitted. I thought maybe it was just a mistake. Something that would sort itself out. But you didn't. No, I said. And that single word carried everything. Because now we both knew. If I had stayed quiet. If I had paid that bill without asking questions. If I had convinced myself it wasn't worth the trouble. None of this would have surfaced. None of it. They would have taken him, David said quietly. Yes. And I would have believed whatever they told me. Yes. That realization settled over both of us at the same time. Heavy. Unavoidable. When the call ended, I leaned back slowly and stared at the ceiling. Not in shock. Not anymore. But in something deeper. Understanding. Clear, undeniable understanding. This wasn't just about money. It never was. Money was only the first step. The easier step. The quieter step. The real plan. Was something else entirely. I sat up again and whispered. You weren't done yet. No. Everything they had been planning was finally coming into the light. At that moment I thought we had uncovered the worst of it. But what the investigators revealed next made one thing absolutely clear. This wasn't just a plan to disappear. It was a plan that had been prepared long before my grandson was even born. That thought stayed with me long into the night. Prepared long before my grandson was even born. It didn't feel like a theory anymore. It felt like truth waiting to be confirmed. I sat in the quiet of my living room, arms folded, staring at nothing in particular. Every piece we had uncovered so far kept aligning into something sharper. Something far more deliberate than we had first believed. This wasn't a reaction. It wasn't a last-minute plan. It was something that had been shaped over time. Carefully. Patiently. The confirmation came the next morning. Another call. Agent Chen. Her voice didn't soften this time. Mrs. Martinez, we've recovered earlier communication logs between Jessica and Marcus Webb. Earlier. That word alone told me everything was about to shift again. How far back? I asked. There was a brief pause. Before your son met her. I felt my breath slow. Before. Yes, she said. Months before they ever crossed paths. I leaned back in my chair slowly. Because that meant one thing. This wasn't something that developed after the relationship. The relationship itself was part of the plan. They had already been discussing potential targets, Agent Chen continued. Evaluating financial stability, family structure, long-term access. Targets. That word settled heavily this time. Clear. Precise. We believe your son was selected deliberately, she added. There was. Fully said. No longer implied. No chance involved, I said quietly. No, she confirmed. None. I closed my eyes briefly. And in that moment, everything memory I had of Jessica entering our lives changed. The first meeting. Her smile. The ease with which she blended in. The way she connected with David so naturally, so quickly. It all felt genuine back then. Well, it felt practiced. They were planning long-term infiltration, Agent Chen continued. Infiltration. Not relationship. Not marriage. Infiltration. They intended to build trust gradually, she explained. Gain access to multiple individuals within the same network. Our family. We weren't just connected by blood anymore. We were mapped. How early did they decide on expanding beyond David? I asked. Very early, she said. You were identified as a secondary financial point, before their engagement. I didn't react right away. I just let the word sit. Secondary point. Not first. Not essential. But part of the structure. Part of the design. After the call ended, I didn't move for a long time. Because now the truth wasn't just uncomfortable. It was undeniable. Jessica hadn't met David by chance. She hadn't grown into this behavior over time. She stepped into our lives already knowing what she intended to do. I stood up slowly and walked around the room. Each step quiet. Measured. Trying to process the weight of that reality. As it changed everything. Not just what happened, but how it happened. My phone rang again. David. I answered. Mom. His voice sounded hollow this time. They told me, he said. I didn't ask what. I knew. They said she knew about me before we even met, he continued. Yes. They said I was selected. There was something in his voice when he said that word. Something that hadn't been there before. Not confusion. Not fear. Something closer to disbelief turning into truth. I keep replaying everything, he said. Every conversation. Every moment. Trying to figure out what was real. I didn't interrupt. What do you even say to that? I thought she chose me, he added quietly. That line stayed in the air longer than anything else. Because behind it, there was something much deeper. Something personal. She did, I said carefully. He didn't respond. She chose you because you were right for what she needed, I continued. The words weren't soft. They weren't comforting. But they were true. Another long silence. Then, so none of it mattered, he asked. That question, it wasn't about facts anymore. It was about everything he had believed. I took a slow breath. Your feelings were real, I said. He didn't respond. She took advantage of that, I added. On the other end, I heard him exhale slowly. Like something inside him had just shifted and settled. Not broken completely, but changed. They planned everything, he said. Yes. The relationship, the trust, the access. Yes. And the baby? He asked quietly. That question stopped me for a moment. Does that part? It was harder. I don't know, I said honestly. But I know this. Nothing else was accidental. Silence. Then, I need to think, he said. I know, I replied. When the call ended, I placed the phone down slowly. Then I sat there again. But this time, it felt different. Because now there were no missing pieces. No misunderstandings left. No confusion. Only truth. Clear. Unfiltered. Heavy. I looked down at my hands and said quietly, you weren't just part of something, you were the plan from the beginning. And that realization. It didn't just change what had already happened. It changed what was still coming. At that moment, I thought we had uncovered the full truth behind everything. But what the investigators revealed next would change the story one final time. Because this plan didn't just end with deception, fraud, or even disappearance. It was leading to something far more devastating than any of us had imagined. By the time that next call came, I already knew it wouldn't be simple. Nothing about this situation had been simple for a long time. I was sitting in the living room, the house quiet as always, when my phone rang. Agent Chen. But this time, something felt different even before I answered. Mrs. Martinez. Yes. Her voice was steady, but there was weight behind every word now. Not cautious anymore. Not uncertain. Definitive. We've completed a full review of the recovered materials from Marcus Webb. I didn't speak. I just listened. Combined with Jessica's communications, we now have a clear picture of their long-term objective. Objective. That word felt colder than everything else. Not mistake. Not situation. Objective. What was it? I asked quietly. There was a short pause. Then she said it. They were planning to stage a disappearance. I closed my eyes slowly. A disappearance? Yes, she said. A controlled one. Controlled. Meaning not accidental. Not chaotic. Planned, down to the smallest detail. They had outlined scenarios, she continued. Most prominently, a fabricated accident. Accident. The word echoed in my mind. They intended to create the appearance that both Jessica and the child were no longer alive. My breath caught for just a second. What? They were preparing a staged situation, likely involving a vehicle, where both would be presumed gone. Gone. I leaned forward slowly, gripping the edge of the table. So David would think? Yes, she said calmly. He would believe he had lost both of them. The room felt completely still. As now. This wasn't just betrayal. This wasn't just fraud. This was something far, far worse. And after that? I asked, my voice quieter now. They would disappear under new identities, she explained, with access to collected financial assets and additional funds. My hands went still. Insurance? I asked. Yes, she said. Policies had already been set in motion. My chest tightened. So that was it. Everything. The planning. The access. The timing of the birth. Even the emotional structure. All leading to this moment. They intended to let your son grieve, she continued, while they relocated and re-established elsewhere. I didn't respond immediately, because no response could truly match the weight of that. To make someone believe they had lost their family, while secretly taking everything and leaving. That wasn't just calculated. That was cruel. In a way I hadn't even imagined before. There's more, she added. Of course there was. There are indications that had complications arisen, there were contingency considerations involving your son as well. That made my heart stop for just a second. What do you mean? She paused carefully. We are still verifying details, but there were notes suggesting that if he discovered the plan early, they would need to ensure he could not interfere. The words were careful. Professional. But the meaning was clear. Too clear. I didn't say anything for a long time. As now. Everything had crossed a line. When the call ended, I placed the phone down slowly. Very carefully. Like even the movement needed control. Because inside me, everything had gone quiet. Not shocked. Not confused. So, my phone rang again. David. Of course. I answered. Mom, he said, his voice already shaking. They told me. I didn't ask him what he heard. I already knew. Is it true? He asked. I closed my eyes briefly. Yes. There was silence. Then I heard him exhale sharply. They were going to make me think my wife and son were dead? Yes. His breathing changed. Slower. Heavier. Controlled. But barely. I would have believed it, he said quietly. That line carried more weight than anything else. Not anger. Not disbelief. Just truth. Yes, I said softly. They were going to leave. Take him. Take everything, he continued almost to himself now. Yes. And I would have stayed here thinking. He stopped. I didn't finish that sentence for him. He already knew. I let her into my life, he said. I trusted her with everything. I know, I replied. And she planned this from the beginning. Yes. The silence that followed was different. Not confusion anymore. Not questioning. Just acceptance of something too heavy to fight. You stopped it, he said finally. I didn't respond immediately. As that thought. It hadn't fully settled until that moment. I questioned the bill, I said quietly. Yes. That's it. But that was enough. One question. One phone call. One moment where something didn't feel right. And I didn't ignore it. If you hadn't, David started, then stopped. I didn't need him to finish. We both knew how that sentence ended. After the call I sat there again. But this time, Everything felt different. Because now I wasn't looking at what almost happened in confusion. I was looking at it with clarity. Every step of their plan had a purpose. Every choice had direction. Every moment was leading somewhere. And the most terrifying part is how close they came. I leaned back slowly and whispered, "You really thought you were going to walk away." But they didn't. At that moment I thought nothing could shock me anymore. But what happened during the final hearing would reveal something none of us expected. Not just about Jessica but about what she truly believed about all of us. The courthouse felt colder than I expected. Not just the air, but the atmosphere. Quiet. Heavy. Like every word spoken inside those walls carried weight that didn't just disappear. I sat there in the back row, hands resting gently in my lap, waiting. Around me people whispered softly. Papers shuffled. Doors opened and closed. And at the front of the room, Jessica sat. Calm. So. Almost detached. For a moment I studied her face carefully, trying to find something. Anything. A sign of regret. Fear. Shame. But there was nothing. Just stillness. David sat a few rows ahead of me, holding Nathan carefully in his arms. My grandson. So small. So unaware. I watched him for a moment, and for a second everything else faded. All the chaos. All the betrayal. All the painful truths. None of it existed for him. He was just here. Safe. And that mattered more than anything. The proceedings began. Formal words. Clear voices. Charges read out one by one. Each one careful, precise, final. Identity fraud. Financial manipulation. Conspiracy. And more. Words that no longer felt unreal. Words that now fit exactly where they belonged. When the judge asked Jessica if she had anything to say, the room went completely silent. I leaned forward slightly without realizing it. Because this was the moment. The moment where everything would either break open or stay exactly the same. She stood up slowly, looked around the room, and then her eyes landed on me. Not on David. Not on anyone else. On me. For a long second, she didn't speak. Then finally, "You all made it easy." Her voice was calm. Flat. Not emotional. Every person in that room went still. "You trusted without asking questions," she continued. "You shared information without thinking twice. You believed what you wanted to believe." I didn't move. I didn't respond. I just listened. "This wasn't difficult," she added. Something in her tone made a few people shift uncomfortably. Because there it was. Not guilt. Not regret. Just belief. "You gave me everything I needed," she said. Then she stopped, looked around once more, and sat down. That was it. No apology. No excuse. No attempt to fix anything. Just truth. Her truth. Told. Clear. Unapologetic. I felt something move inside me then. But it wasn't anger. It wasn't even sadness. It was clarity. Because in that moment, I realized something important. Very important. People like that don't see what they've done the way we do. They don't feel it the same way. And waiting for them to understand only keeps you tied to them longer. The judge spoke again. The sentence followed. Years. A long time. Long enough for consequences to matter. Long enough for everything she built to end. No one celebrated. No one reacted loudly. Because this wasn't a victory. Not really. It was an ending. After the hearing, people slowly began to leave. David stood near the front, still holding Nathan. I walked toward him quietly. He looked tired. Different. But stronger in a way that hadn't been there before. "How are you holding up?" I asked softly. He let out a small breath. "I don't think I'll understand all of this anytime soon," he admitted. "That's okay," I replied. He looked down at Nathan. Then back at me. "Thank you." I tilted my head slightly. "For what?" "For not ignoring it," he said. "For questioning something that didn't feel right." I smiled gently. "That's all it was," I said. "Just one question." And that was the truth. It didn't take something huge. It didn't take strength I didn't have. It just took a moment where I didn't ignore what felt wrong. He hesitated for a second, then stepped a little closer. "Mom, I'm sorry," he said quietly. That word carried more weight than anything else he had said. "I should have told you that night. I should have stopped you from making that drive." Or at least been honest. I looked at him for a moment. Then nodded slowly. Yes, you should have. He swallowed slightly. I was trying to keep things calm. Easy. I know, I said. Then I added softly. But sometimes keeping things quiet allows the wrong things to grow. He nodded, understanding now, in a way he hadn't before. Then he placed Nathan gently in my arms. For the first time, I held him carefully, fully, like I had imagined all those days before. And everything else faded again. Hi there, I whispered. His tiny hand moved slightly. Warm. Safe. I smiled. A real smile this time. Not forced. Not tired. Just real. In that moment, I realized something I hadn't fully understood before. The story didn't end in that courtroom. It didn't end with those charges. It didn't even end with everything we lost. It ended right here. With something small. Something simple. Something still intact. Family. I looked up at David. We'll be all right, I said quietly. He nodded. Yeah. That evening we drove home together. The same road, but completely different. No tension. No confusion. Just silence. The peaceful kind. The kind that doesn't need to be filled. Back at the house, everything felt familiar again. The kitchen. Fable. The same place where it had all started. I made tea. Finally drank it while it was warm. And sat there, watching Nathan sleeping peacefully nearby. I thought about everything. The invitation. The drive. The hospital door. The truth that followed. All of it. And I realized something simple. Something that doesn't sound big, but changes everything. Sometimes, the most important thing you can do in your life is not ignore the small moment when something feels wrong. Not because you want conflict. Not because you expect the worst. But because truth often shows itself quietly first. If I had ignored that feeling, if I had told myself, it's probably nothing. It's not worth questioning. Let it go. Everything would have been different. But I didn't. And because of that, everything changed. I looked down at Nathan one last time and smiled softly. You're safe, I whispered. And for the first time since this all began, I felt something settle inside me. Not relief. Not even closure. Just peace. Sometimes life doesn't ask for strength in big moments. It asks for courage in small ones. In that quiet second when something doesn't feel right. Because that one question, that one doubt, that one decision to not look away, might be the very thing that protects everything you love.